Hi, Jane.
Hey, Jana, great to be here with you today.
Thanks. Nice to have you back. It's been a while since we chatted, but
It really has. Way
yeah,
too long.
I know, much too long. I think the last time I saw you in person, it was actually in Bordeaux. We did that think tank event, and then we listened to records at your
Back
place.
at our house. That was a wonderful, wonderful evening.
It was. It was. All right. So I'm going to just double check with our producer. Are we live everywhere, Marine? Can I get a thumbs up in the chat? Think we are good. We're good. Okay. All right. So let's kick it off. Just give me 1 second here. All right. Cool. So, hi everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Wine Wednesday. This is the dVIN live stream where we uncork a bottle, we chat about wine, and we spill all the latest dVIN updates. We have been we really do this almost every Wednesday. If we don't do this on Wednesday, take a look at the Luma calendar and you'll see if there's a gap for whatever reason. We usually fill that in with a specialized virtual event of some sort. But today I am going to be introducing a very, very special guest. Thrilled to be joined by one of the most respected voices in wine. We've got Jane Anson with us. Jane spent nearly 2 decades as Decanter's Bordeaux correspondent, right, Jane?
2 decades, crazy. 2003 to 2020.
Oh my goodness. Okay, she's also anyone who is interested in Bordeaux at all and has looked into learning anything about Bordeaux, you have certainly come across Jane's book Inside Bordeaux. It's kind of like the Bible of Bordeaux. Jane is like a kind of a walking masterclass on the region's wines. So really, really, really excited to have you here, Jane. Thank you so much for joining us. And a little inside info. Jane's been a founding member of Club dVIN since the very beginning. So that's fun.
That is true. And you guys have been so supportive. When I left Decanter and I launched my site, janeanson.com, you guys were just amazing. And I did an NFT kind of celebration to launch the site. And I did it with you guys as partners. So you've been wonderful.
That's right. The NFT ebook of Inside Bordeaux. That was awesome. Oh my goodness, that feels like that is that that long
I
ago?
think it was
3 years
maybe
ago?
2021. It was probably 2021. But
Wow.
yeah, that's crazy, a long time ago now.
That was very fun though. That was a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So first rule of dVIN, everybody who wants to be having a glass of wine, this is Wine Wednesday. So everyone who is having a glass of wine, this is your reminder to get it now or refill it if you've already gotten to the bottom. Jane, what are you going to be drinking today?
Yeah, so it's 5 o'clock in the European time zone. I'm guessing some people are in other time zones that may be later or earlier. I have got a glass. I'm going to be honest with you all. I was thinking I really should have a Bordeaux, but downstairs I've got opened a beautiful, beautiful Sicilian red from Peter Vindig Diaz, who used to live in Bordeaux and made a lot of Bordeaux wines back in the, I guess, 90s. And now he has an estate called Monte Carubo, which is just kind of south of Etna in Sicily. It's beautiful. So I'm drinking that. But I thought I'd better also bring up one of my favorite Bordeaux, just in case, which is Montlandry 2020. So maybe later tonight we'll have a little bit of that.
Okay. All right, that's my goodness. I mean, I'm sure you've got tons of great wine at home, so no shortage, but the Sicilian wine sounds fantastic. I have two options and I need you to choose for me. No pressure. So, all right. Wine number 1, I have a 2014 Château La Lagune.
Very
Okay.
nice.
Or since you've got a 2020 over there, I've also got a 2020 Château Cabernet. So I've got a white or a red.
Oh, that's a tough choice. But
No,
if where you are, you're in Dusseldorf,
I am.
if it's anything like where I am, I've got beautiful sunshine streaming through the window here.
Me
So
too.
I would probably say you got to go Carbonear 2020, and it's
Doing it.
such
Okay.
such a good white wine.
Jane has chosen, and actually I have a you know what? I didn't introduce myself. And that's funny because usually you can't shut me up at the beginning, but for I'm going to open my wine and introduce myself at the same time. So, anyone who doesn't know me, I am your host, Jana Kryline. I am one of the co-founders of dVIN Labs. certified wine geek, but really it's interesting that I've gotten into the tech side of wine because I really do come from a traditional wine background. And dVIN Labs, for anyone who doesn't know, dVIN Labs is building the infrastructure for the investment grade wine industry on the blockchain. So the investment grade wine asset class is probably about 300 to 350 billion dollars as an asset class. It's a pretty big number. And we're building kind of the infrastructure to put all of those wines on chain, and basically build a global order book for wine so that you'll actually be able to lend against your wine, trade instantly. And obviously the goal is to have, unified trading, unified pricing, transparent pricing for investment grade wine. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've been at it for about 3.5 years, and the pieces are all starting to click into place. We've got partner marketplaces that are going to be popping up very, very soon. We're going to launch the very first marketplace in a couple of weeks. Looks like mid-June. And from there, we've got about 5 channel partners that are going to be online by the end of this year. So about $50 million worth of wine this year on chain that you're going to be able to start trading kind of instantly. And yeah, it's about time that wine gets an order book, starts to enjoy the benefits of being a real world asset. Like, wine has never really had that opportunity. So first things first, cheers, Jane.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Cheers. Great to be here. Great to be here with you all.
Very, very nice. Thank you very much. We are going to be focusing today on Bordeaux, specifically Left Bank. But we're also going to be talking about the 2024 Bordeaux futures, since Bordeaux on Premier just wrapped. So for those new to Bordeaux, when we talk about the Left Bank, we're referring to the western side of the Gironde estuary. Jane, can you give us like a quick overview of Left Bank Bordeaux?
Sure. And actually, I'm going to link it back to what you were just saying about investment grade wine. Because if we were sitting here 15 years ago in 2010, investment grade wine, meaning wine which can be sold on the secondary market. So
Yeah.
wines which were sold on the secondary market in that year, 2010, were about 90% Bordeaux. And of that, the vast majority would have been Left Bank Bordeaux, because that part of Bordeaux, as you say, on the western side of that big river, the Garonne River, is really where the Médoc is. And the Médoc is the home of Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Mouton, Haut-Brion, all of those kind of very famous first growth chateaus. And that was for many, many decades what we really meant when we talked about investment grade Bordeaux. Investment grade wine, full stop. That has changed over the last 15 years, hugely diversified. So, Burgundy is now a huge part of investment grade wine. Napa, Tuscany, all of those things have come and taken kind of Bordeaux's sole crown in many ways. And today, if you're looking at about 35% of that secondary market being Bordeaux. So that's changed. But let's go back to why those wines were so dominant for so long. And that idea of Left Bank that we're going to be talking about today is at the heart of wines which are able to age. Because what does it mean to be investment grade? It means that these are wines which are structured enough and which have got enough tannins and acidity and kind of good depth of fruit that they are able to be kept for a long time. Because you can't buy and sell and trade a wine if it's going to be dead within 2 or 3 years. That's the kind of wine that you're wanting to be open, share with your friends, but you don't worry about it being an investment. So in order for a wine to be able to be an investable, it's got to be able to age. And the good thing about Left Bank Bordeaux is there is water kind of all around. You have the river that we just talked about, that Garonne River, but you also have the Atlantic Ocean on the other side. So think of Left Bank Bordeaux as basically the strip of land that goes in between this River Garonne and then where the Atlantic coast starts. It's closer to the river, but that's kind of what Left Bank Bordeaux means. And why does that matter? It matters because if you've got the ocean, you have winds, you have rain, you have all of this kind of stuff where Bordeaux is kind of thriving on the edge of adversity. Like you'll get a lot of difficult vintages, but you'll also get these stunningly beautiful depth of tannic grip and hold, and it allows the wines to age.
Yeah, all right. And so typically, left bank compared to the right bank is more Cabernet Sauvignon, right? It's Cabernet Sauvignon dominant, which also gives it more structure and age worthiness and elegance. On the right bank, there tends to be more Merlot forward blends. There are some wines that are actually predominantly Cabernet Franc on the right bank, but we are focusing on left bank. That was a great overview, Jane. I'm going to be really nerdy, and Dave always does this. He does this thing where when we introduce a region, he pulls out a map. He goes like kind of, rummaging behind him. Always takes a minute, and then he pulls out a wine map. So I am going to pull a Dave today. And Jane, you'll like this. We gotta zoom out somehow here because this is hilarious. When I was doing my WSET diploma, I actually, everyone always says that Burgundy is more complicated than Bordeaux. I found Bordeaux was much more complicated than Burgundy. So I made this giant wine mind map. So this was on my kitchen wall for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. Anyway, this is my version of Dave's.
I love that.
Yeah. And I kept it. And I don't know, one day when I have more space than I have in my little European apartment, I might make it a permanent fixture somewhere as a memory. But yeah.
So talking of wine maps, and also talking of well, of Burgundy. When I launched my business, I wanted to like recognize the fact that Bordeaux is this incredibly important region worldwide, which is sold in, you name it. If a country drinks wine, they're able to buy and sell Bordeaux wine somewhere. Anyway, and yet you go to vineyards or you go to wine shops or wine stores, etc., world over, and it's those Burgundy maps which are on every single wall. So what I have done over the last 6 months, it's been like a new thing I've just launched, is I have 4 maps which show the different parts of Bordeaux, which are beautiful poster kind of size maps which will go on the wall. So they started off being in the book inside Bordeaux, but then we took them out of the book and we've made them onto these beautiful wall maps that show the different soil types and where the different chateaux are. Because I also felt like, you know what, I think Bordeaux is in many ways more complicated than Burgundy, and it doesn't get enough of a recognition of how interesting the different soil types are and the different flavors that you can get from different parts of Bordeaux.
I agree. No one is talking about that. No, that's fantastic. That's a good addition. I mean, this on the wall is a bit of an eyesore. Your maps would actually be beautiful. So, it's just like, it's not allowed to be on the kitchen wall anymore. So one day in like a basement or something. But your maps, I could actually put up anywhere. So I'll have to take a look at those.
Yeah, please do.
Amazing. Okay, so let's
2024 Bordeaux.
Yeah. Okay, so en primeur. Maybe let's start with what en primeur is, because I think that a lot of people sort of hear it and understand. Maybe they understand Bordeaux Futures, but can you just walk us through the kind of campaign and how it works,
Yeah.
why it's set up
And
that way?
I think we tend to think that that is the way that all Bordeaux wine is sold en primeur, but it's really not. Bordeaux en primeur, again, is connected to that investment grade in very much. So maybe it used to be 5% of Bordeaux wine. It's probably even less than that now, that is sold as a future. So it's sold about 12 months, sometimes even 18 months before that wine is actually fully realized and put into a bottle. So what happens is, you could again think of it like as I don't know, there's the Cannes Film Festival right now, which is previewing the movies which are going to be coming out over the next year. It's very similar to that. So the main chateaus, the big chateaus who are, again, able to do investment grade wines, what they do is they'll harvest, they make the wine, and then about 6 months after harvest, they show it. So about maybe up to 4,000 or 5,000 different people will come to Bordeaux for a single week in the spring following the harvest. And those people might be somms, they might be big retailers, sometimes they're buyers for major airlines. And then you have a group of journalists and critics like I am, and we taste those wines and begin the discussion. Everyone has their own kind of gig. So my discussion would be, what do they taste like? I give scores. I publish the scores as an annual tasting report. And then other people like the merchants would begin the discussion of how much will they be prepared to pay for them. So all of these things are going on at the same time. And right now we're in May. So the En Primeur happened last month in April. And in this month in May, the chateaus are releasing their prices. And around the world, people decide if they're going to buy or not. And in theory, this is the time that the price is the same to everybody throughout the world. This is the theory. It comes out of the chateau and everyone buys at the same price. And then in theory, again, it should be the lowest price you're ever going to get. So when it's released after En Primeur, the way the system is supposed to work is that it will then have gone up in price from the En Primeur price. As I'm sure we're going to discuss later, that is not always the case. It has been less and less the case in recent years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, exactly. And we will definitely get into that. Also, Jane, please remind me, I'm going to make a note, but something just reminded me that you just said about the Petrus in space thing. We need to talk
Okay.
about that at the end. So there's a little
Okay.
hook. We're going to bring it back. There was some wine that went to space and Jane got to taste it. So we're going to have to bring that back at the end of the podcast.
Oh,
Okay.
maybe that it's connected to.
There we go. That might be what it was subconsciously, Okay, so let's talk about the 2024 vintage overall in terms of style and quality. How would you characterize the 24 vintage?
So it was definitely a challenging vintage. This was a year where you had a lot of rain throughout the whole season. And, you know, it's worth saying, like I mentioned before, Bordeaux is not a region that is a stranger to rain. Like we're used to thinking in Napa, in Tuscany, in Barossa, that if it isn't a super hot year where everything goes right and it's sunny all the time, that it's a write-off, that it's a disaster. That's really not the case for Bordeaux in many, many vintages because they are used to dealing with challenging vintages. But having said that, 2004 kind of 2024 threw everything at them that could possibly um, kind of put up a barrier to success. So you had a lot of mildew at the beginning of the year. You had some frost. You had rain. You had two kind of good months. July and August were nice. They were pretty dry. They weren't massively sunny, but they were dry. And then just as everyone was relaxing, thinking, yeah, we're going to pull this one out of the bag, then the rain came back during harvest. So it was a vintage where you had to be on good terroir. You had to really have those good soils that could drain well and that could heat up when needed. And you had to have money. It was a vintage where you needed to be out in the vineyard doing exactly, really loving your vines at every second, every step along the way, and then sorting. So taking out problems again as they came up. So if you did all of that, I found some really good wines. And you're having that beautiful Cabernet white there from 2020, I think. So
Right.
you're going to find some gorgeous dry whites in 2024 as well.
Okay.
Because white grapes don't need that same level of heat as the reds do. And in fact, overly hot years for white wines can kind of kill those beautiful aromatics that we all love for white wines.
Yeah.
So, it's an up and down year, but definitely was not easy.
Okay. Yeah, that's it's when you've got to be that on the vines and then even all season. I remember when I was first studying wine, when I started to do my sommelier education, I can remember I completed my certified somm certification and still even at the end of that with the Court of Master Sommeliers at the end of that course, I still had never stepped foot in a vineyard and I didn't realize how much work went behind how many times you have to touch the vine every year. I was thinking, the vine grows and then you harvest the fruit at the end of the year and then the work begins. I had no idea. So in a difficult vintage, when you've got to be on top of that vine as often as you can. And then once you finally get through the season and bring it in, and you've got to be sorting it on the, doing different kinds of selection before the grapes go into the tank and everything else that you've got to kind of do. It makes sense that you say you need to have money. You need to have
Yeah, it's
you need
tough.
to have the
And
technology.
so for the last 4 years, I've been running this with a friend of mine, this a week which is called the Bordeaux Mentor Week, when we
Yeah.
get a group of young people starting out in their wine careers from really all over the world, India, Nigeria, Ecuador. We've had people from really all over the world, and they come and spend a week. It's like a boot camp, and it's always at the time of harvest. For the first couple of years, they were able to do the harvest on the first day, kind of get their hands dirty and get out in the vineyards. But last year, because the sugar levels just hadn't risen high enough and everybody was waiting. It was a really late harvest. Everybody was holding on. So the first day this year, rather than picking, what they did was they did the leaf stripping. So they stripped as many leaves away as they could from the vines so that all of those grapes that were left behind could get the sunshine and could, continue to ripen. Or if there was any rot, they could kind of make sure that the grapes were as kind of aerated, well aerated as possible. So it was really fascinating. Like, you always learn something, don't you? Anytime you go into a vineyard, you learn something new.
Yeah. No, that was definitely, it was one of the best parts of my education was actually when I finished the Somm certification, then moving to Europe and working at a winery for a few years was like, oh my God, okay, now I understand, everything
Yeah,
clicked.
yeah.
Okay, so back to 24. So what regions, or sorry, what chateaus really stood out for you this year?
So and I think that's the right question, is which chateaus, which individual
Yeah,
producers, rather than saying, oh, it's definitely a left bank or it's definitely a right bank, because it's really not the case. Um, there were some real successes. If you take that idea of you needed money, you needed terroir, and you needed experience, you needed a really good team. You needed people at the top who were prepared to say, I don't care what you do, you just focus on quality. So there were quite a few estates in San Julian who really did very well because they fit all of that criteria. San Julian is an appellation that is 90% owned by classified estates. So that means that it's an area which has the money and the willingness to really, put in the time. So estates like Les Poifferet, super successful. I really enjoyed them. Ducru Beaucaillou did a really good job. Leopold Barton. So those kind of big names. I found on the right bank a lot of very good Merlots. So Merlot was a bit tough at the beginning of the season. They had a bad time during flowering, so they're very low yields. But Merlot gets ripe easier than Cabernet Sauvignon. It doesn't need that hugely long growing season in quite the same way. So I did find some really nice stuff in Pomerol and some nice stuff in Saint-Emilion. My wine of the vintage was probably L'Église Clinée. So L'Église Clinée in Pomerol, awesome estate. But again, not that surprising when you think about it, because that's a very small family owned estate. It's high profile and prestigious, but still, it is a family-owned estate, and it's a woman winemaker, Noemi, and she is in the vineyards every single day, no matter the season. So I really felt like she got her reward this year. It was very good.
Oh, cool. Wow. Okay. I mean, look, you guys, you heard it here. You heard it from Jane. That's really interesting. Okay. So we talked about it a little bit leading up to this question, but we've seen price drops this year that have been pretty hard to ignore. It's almost like a factory reset. So what's your take on how that shaped market participation and perception?
So it's so tough for these guys. It really is. Um, they've had a year where the yields are very low, and they've had to, low naturally, and then they have to make them lower by sorting and getting rid of so much that wasn't up to scratch. And the market is, kind of not an easy place to be, but they have to drop their prices anyway to try and get some interest and excitement going from the market. So you have big names like Lafite, Angelus, Cheval. They all dropped by, I think, around 30%.
20,
Monrose around 30%.
yeah.
Smith Oak Lafite 28%. These guys came down a long way. In some cases, they're right back to where they were in 2014. Now, even though the market is tough, that sounds to me like a buying signal if you are brave. If you're willing. One of the things I find so interesting in Bordeaux, it's such a reflection of all of us. We're all such herd creatures. And when things are scary and you feel the markets are going down, you miss out on a lot of buy signals. You miss out on actually, these are good prices. So 2008, for example, global financial crisis, the prices went down in Bordeaux to extremely low, like the lowest we are going to probably see again, probably. Like, you could buy first grace for 100 euros. But the global financial market was such that it was scary to think of buying them. But the smart people, and I was not one of those smart people, but the smart people would have bought heavily in 2008 because it was a pretty good vintage and you could see those prices were very, very good. 2019, kind of the same thing. 2019, you had COVID. So by the time that, remember, en primeur, it's always coming out the year after. So 2019 means it was coming out pretty much exactly as COVID was shutting us all down. So kind of April of 2020. So the Bordelais priced very well. They priced pretty low, and again, it was a good vintage. If you'd bought in 2019, you would have made money because the prices all went up because they came out a very good price. But again, I was
Mm.
a little bit smarter in 2019. I could see how good the prices were, but still, I didn't buy much. But people who did will have been rewarded. And then you have vintages like 2022, which are everybody loves, incredible, great weather, high prices, which makes people excited. But if you're smart, those are not the vintages to be buying en primeur because already those prices have gone up very, very high. So it's a hard one to call. But right now, if you're sensible and you look at those prices, a 2014 price for a wine like a Lafite or a Cheval Blanc, it's hard to say that's not at least worth a thought. Is it worth buying? This is a vintage which has some very good wines at the top. The guys who have been able to fulfill that criteria I was talking about,
Yeah.
and these are prices which could maybe be interesting. You have some estates that didn't play that game. So Ponte Canet came out first. Ponte Canet kind of kicked off the whole um, process of en primeur this year and was only a 9% drop. And I think that kind of took the wind out of everybody's sails right at the beginning. But if you're smart, you can find some really good prices.
Okay. So buyers are back, but do you think that's only because the numbers finally are starting to make sense again? I mean, that's kind of a classic
Yeah,
bear market strategy, right? You kind of slash,
exactly right. Exactly.
restore confidence, get liquidity flowing again. Whew.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that lots of the chateaus, I think some of the problem is even after all of this time, a lot of chateaus price according to what their neighbors are pricing. They're not pricing according to what truly works in the market. So I'm saying here there are some good prices, and there are, no question, but too many chateaus have still yet again missed the opportunity to get those prices that connect out there. And I think a lot of the reason is because they're thinking, well, what did I price in 22 or 23? They're not thinking, what is the lowest price that is out there right now in the market for my brand, and therefore I should be trying to get excitement connected to that price, not to the price that I came out at last year in 2023 when it was probably a bit overpriced anyway.
Hmm. Yeah. Oof. So do you think that this year's campaign is a turning point for Bordeaux, or is this just a one-off correction?
So Bordeaux is such a fascinating place. It really is. It's one of the reasons why I still, after 23 years living here, still it fascinates me because it's cyclical in many ways. Like open a book from the 19th century and you see people saying Bordeaux wine is too expensive. They're putting off all of their buyers. They're never going to find anyone. And yet somehow this region manages to connect to people over and over again. So I would say never count Bordeaux out. There's something extremely special about this region. And one of the things that's special about it is this ability not just to make good wine by a couple of thousand bottles or a couple of thousand cases, but to be able to make good wine at scale and wines that can last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So it can afford to go through a couple of years, which are really tough, for at least for those top guys, because they can wait it out and they can wait till the market comes back round. Um, right now, it is very tough out there for many Bordeaux producers. Really, they are just about barely holding on, and you're seeing an awful lot of estates being sold. You're seeing a lot of mergers. You're seeing, it's pretty brutal out there, I think, for many of the smaller estates, which is why even at the top guys, these en primeur guys, they are very conscious of having to find prices that work in the marketplace. I wish that more of them had done these very, very smart back to 2014 prices.
Mm. So yeah, I mean, what's happening in Bordeaux right now with the price drops and cautious buyers and this need for confidence, it's like we've said, it's kind of a turning point. But it's actually, this is now going to be a dVIN plug, because this is exactly the kind of moment that we've been building for, right? So when negociants and wineries tokenize their inventory, this is what we do at dVIN, right? They're not just solving for today's cash flow issues, but they're actually building a structure where liquidity and transparency and global demand are baked into the model. So whether it's instant trading access or real-time price discovery or the ability to borrow against stock without selling a single bottle, we're kind of giving Bordeaux stakeholders the tools to thrive and not just survive in this new market. But yeah, I mean, when you see price drops like we've seen this year, it really highlights just how stuck the system kind of currently is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the smart thing is to realize that the power is definitely shifting back towards the buyers, at least for now. But as I say, look back in history, and that's what Bordeaux has been about for many, many centuries. There are times when the chateaus have all the power. There are times when the negociants have all the power. And then there are times when neither of those people have power. And it's the end buyers who have the power. And, right now we're pretty much at that moment.
Yeah. Oh, interesting times, interesting times. On that note, I'm gonna top up my class. All right. Well, so I think we kind of covered on Premier now. Let's sort of zoom out and look at left bank power players and kind of,
Okay.
this is where some of the biggest names in wine worldwide reside, right? So I'm kind of curious about, I mean, obviously I'm curious about innovation at dVIN. But who among all the kind of top producers on the left bank, who do you see really innovating? And compared to who's sticking really to tradition and who's really innovating?
So there's innovation and tradition in many kind of different forms in Bordeaux. So we mentioned Pontet Canet. Pontet Canet, I didn't make a super smart pricing decision, I would say, this year. But at the same time, Pontet Canet has led the way and been hugely innovative in many other forms over the last decade. You walk into Pontet Canet Chateau today, and you might think this is the least kind of technically advanced than of any estate, because it's all organic, biodynamic. There's very little kind of high tech stuff that you will see. They wouldn't use. So this year, for example, a lot of estates use optical sorting, because you needed to get rid of these, the berries that hadn't got fully ripe. So a lot of people would be using optical sorting. They might be using density sorting, all that kind of stuff.
So
Pontet
just to
Canet.
explain sort of what that is, that's when you have a machine that basically it's almost like a laser. So you've got the grapes are on a conveyor belt, and it's basically a machine that just zaps, like it shoots air right at the grapes that are.
Yeah. Well, they all have different. There's so many different kinds, but yeah, that's definitely one of them. They might pick on the color thing, or you can kind of set it to your own. And then density was hugely important this year, because the hang on, I'm going to just say, can you hear in the background somebody talking downstairs?
No, I don't.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. Anyway, so yes, so the weight of the berries was super important this year as well. So anyway, a lot of the estates brought out all the big guns of these very high tech machines. But Pontet, because it is so extremely careful about its biodynamic philosophies, everything is done by hand still. Everything is visual. Everything is done purely by hand. They use a lot of amphora. They use and their amphora are out of earth from their own land, which is then baked into making these the way that they make the wine. Everything is beautifully old fashioned, and yet they've really led this renaissance in Bordeaux towards organic biodynamic farming. So they're an interesting kind of juxtaposition between being very innovative and yet being very traditional. So I love taking people to that chateau for exactly that reason. So they're awesome. Just up the road, you have Monrose. Monrose is kind of the opposite in that, again, this is a 1855 second growth, so extremely, prestigious estate. They very much use technology to a brilliant way. So if you go into their wine cellar, you'll see they have huge kind of banks on the wall of screens that show everything, very, very detailed tracking of the different temperatures in different parts of the vineyard, um, how much water is being used, or um, an uptake of water in different parts. Every single parameter that you can imagine is being tracked in the vineyards of Monrose. They also are organic. I'm not sure if they're biodynamic as well, but certainly that's still very, very environmentally aware winemaking. A lot of uh, um, photovoltaic, what's it called? A lot of uh, photovoltaic in English. Oh my God, I've lived here too long. Panels, sun, using like the sun, using alternative energies and all energy sources. So they do fabulous stuff. But at the same time, Monrose is just now launching. They're doing a special cuvee of wine that's just from Terrace 3, so just from a specific type of terroir. So they are kind of combining again this idea of being very, very high tech and innovative, and tracking everything they need to make a great wine. But at the same time, they're focusing on the story and the history, and this idea of the soil types. So these terraces that you find up and down the Médoc. So Monrose is another good example of an estate that I think is really showing the way of how you can be innovative while also being respectful of your history.
Yeah. I think it's a really good blend. I mean, you can bring in the big guns from a technology perspective, from a wine technology perspective, because it's of course going to help you make a better wine. But on the other side of it, of course, this artisanal, real, classic way of making wine traditionally. If you're really hands on and you're spending a lot of time with each individual vine and you're hand sorting everything. I mean, it's not that one is better than the other, but combining those is, my goodness.
Yeah, it's very cool, definitely. And it's where, sadly, those big guys will always have an advantage because they are able to
Yeah.
take the best of both worlds. And in fact, I just want to go back to En Primeur for a second
Yeah.
to say something else that I think is fun about En Primeur. So I think we're all very down on En Primeur now. In many ways, it is not delivering what it used to, and it's tough to really get behind in many ways because there's so much great Bordeaux wine that you can buy, which is already in bottle, etc. However, one of the things that I think that's super fun from a consumer point of view is having this moment every year to just check in with what's happening in Bordeaux. So that idea, as you say, of what's happening at the top estates, who's innovating, who's being innovative, who is really staying very traditional. This is the time of year when you actually really get to be reminded about that and to see it in action because you're visiting the properties. That's one of my jobs at this time of year is to go and visit a lot of these estates, and so you're really checking in and realizing all of these things that we wouldn't know if we didn't have that moment of the year when your whole focus is on what's happening in Bordeaux. So I really like that about it. The other thing I love about En Primeur is you always find there's a new estate or there's new owners, or there's something that's happening in the vineyard which is kind of fun to follow. So this year the first vintage was last year, but this was the year that I met them and really kind of got behind the story. There's a tiny little estate in Saint Julien, which is called Evoque, and it's a completely new estate. And I remember I said before, Saint Julien is 90% classified vines, so you never get new estates. It's like very, very rare. There's
Yeah.
one other tiny one, La Fleur Loga, which was probably 20 years ago now, which was exciting new estate. But this one, Evoque, has been created by a guy and his wife who spent about 10 years living all over the world. I think they worked in oil and gas or some kind of interesting, completely non-wine industry. But their family own one of the small remaining Saint Julien estates called Fingrave. Anyway, Fingrave. Anyway, they were asked to come back and work with the family estate. So back they came. They bought a little property in the middle of Saint Julien for maybe 200,000 euros. I don't know, like a small estate, sorry, a small 1970s house, like a really kind of a modern build house. And then they realized that they had AOC planting rights where the house was standing. So they knocked the house down completely and planted vines where the house was standing,
I
and
would
that
have.
wine is now in bottle and it's called Evoke, and that is a fun story. And that's the kind of thing I really love about En Primeur, is when you get to hear those kind of stories.
How cool is that? I mean, geez, what a jackpot. Okay, the house has to go, but
Yeah.
it's such
And
a
so the
test.
house was worth 200,000. That plot of land is
Right.
worth considerably more than that, probably 4 or 5 times what the house was worth as soon as there are vines on it.
See, the crypto Twitter degens watching this. That's a good 5x, guys.
It's
That's
a good 5x. Yes.
yeah, amazing. Okay, well, so my God, I don't own any land, but if I was buying a property and someone told me that my house was sitting on AOC planting rights, I would have done the same thing. It's a no-brainer. Very
Yeah,
cool.
I agree. I agree. A great story.
Okay. So, all right, we're actually already almost at time. So I'm going to speed things up a little. I'm going to skip
Okay.
a few things, but Jane, you've still got a few minutes, I hope.
Yeah, yeah, I'm good.
Great. Okay. So let's talk about just collectors and critics. Do you think that people are really fixated on first growths, or are we seeing like a broader appreciation beyond the usual kind of suspects?
So I think what's been really interesting, when you look at the way that the market's changed over the last 5 years, first growths are solid blue chip investments. Over the last 5 years, where you've had a very exciting rising market, or maybe let's say over the last 10 years, so from 2010 through to give or take 2018, give or take, you had a very strong widening of the market. So you had a lot of second wines of the first growth coming hugely, hugely growing. Things like Cabernet de Lafite, um, all of those kind of second wines, and also a real widening to super seconds, a lot of right banks, and then at the same time, a lot of wines from other parts of the world. When the economy contracts and you have really tough times, like we're seeing right now in the market, it is when first grows kind of prove their worth in many ways, because they are wines that we all recognize. They're names that we recognize. There's a solidity and a security to them. The biggest problem that first growers have had over the last decade is they came out so crazily high in 2009, 2010, particularly. Those two vintages really, really was a problem, created a problem of their own creation, but created a problem for them in the secondary market in terms of how they're perceived, because they were so high that they really haven't still caught up to the very height that they were just after that release in 9 and 10, and that has been tough. But if you're looking long term as a long term hold, or if you're looking at buying in these less celebrated vintages like 2024, I would still say the first growths are long term good bets, because they make good wine that lasts. So, I mean, this is a crazy extreme example, but I was in Florida last week at Burn's Steakhouse, 2 weeks ago. Burn's Steakhouse, one of the best wine cellars in any restaurant in the world. I had a 1921 Aubryon, 1921 Aubryon, which was still tasting pretty bloody delicious. And you won't, you don't get that with many wines. I'm not saying that that's going to happen to. That was actually a pretty good hot vintage 21, but
God.
still, it's they prove their worth. But yes, yes, there has been a widening. Of course, there's been a widening to other exciting wines which have shown what they can do. Ponte Canet being one, Lynchbage being another, Bechevel another. These estates which are still classified, still left bank, still have that real ability to show their worth over the long term. But right now, it's like property. It's like property. When there's a downturn, location, 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 and that is very, very true for wine as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. What about younger collectors? Do you think that younger collectors are actually showing more of an interest in Bordeaux, or does it feel like an older guard region?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all are definitely aware that a lot of the collectors of Bordeaux the whole baby boomer generation and generation X, which I am myself, and kind of now younger generations, of course, are much more open and exposed to many, many different regions. Again, it goes back to, it's just simple arithmetic. Back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, there weren't that many other major wine regions that were actually selling on a global stage. So that has changed. Bordeaux has not done a great job of connecting to the new generation. I think they're trying now to do a better job of being more open, being more welcoming, offering experiences, trying to be more authentic, connecting with this idea that it matters how you treat people that work at your property. It matters how you treat the vineyard. All of these things,
Yeah.
that they're definitely catching up with that. But I think it's also important to say, we're so used to saying, well, young people don't drink wine anymore. I mean, it actually, most young people never drank wine. It's not really that, it doesn't, just because you don't drink wine when you're 20 doesn't mean you're not going to drink it when you're 30. But also, there isn't the same disposable income right now for most people to spend on wine as there was. So the baby boomers can be very happy to say that they could buy wine, but that's because they bought their houses at a fraction of what houses cost today, and they're now the landlords who are taking all of that money. So the younger generation can't afford to buy wine. So it's a much more complicated picture. I think the reality is, you if you find a way to connect, if you make good wine, and you're open and prepared to kind of tell the story of who you are and why what you're making is different from somebody else, you're always going to have the ability to connect. But yes, Bordeaux needs to get better at finding those human, personal interactions and connections.
Yeah. That's interesting. I also think it's interesting because one of the sort of challenges that we've had with dVIN from the very beginning has been who we're talking to, right? Because we're first and foremost, we're a wine project, but we are a blockchain company and also a crypto company in some regard, right? We have a native token, and it's really been a challenge to figure out how to message what we're doing. And are we talking to wineries? Well, sure, of course we're talking to wineries, but we're also talking to the middle of the supply chain, and we're also talking directly to consumers, and we're also talking to crypto Twitter. It's just like, where on the Venn diagram does any of this overlap, right? It's very minimal in that regard. So I think, I go to all these crypto conferences all over the world, and I go to wine conferences all over the world, and we throw kind of side events, and we'll bring great bottles of wine. But when we do that in the crypto and Web3 space, I'm always really, really shocked because there's so many young people in this space who have all kinds of wealth, that they've made through Web3 and crypto and projects like that, or on meme coins, whatever it is. There's a lot of young people that we're seeing are very interested in the concept of investing in wine, but they don't know anything about it. And I think
So that
wineries would have no
that goes
idea.
back to my point that it's that dismissing people who are young people for not drinking wine is actually more about their ability to purchase and to enjoy and to engage with that wine. So therefore, your experience is you're with an age group who have the disposable income also to be able to do it, and you're finding that they are excited. That's why I think it's way too simple to say it's a generational thing.
Yeah,
It isn't just a generational thing.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay, so because I know we are getting closer to time, we cannot leave without hearing from our very own AI wine whisperer. So, Jane, before we went live, I was telling you I think very briefly that we have built a really, really cool
Yeah, I'm
AI
excited.
tool for wine. So, and I've got to send you the link so that you can get into the beta testing of Bacchus. But Bacchus is basically your Bloomberg terminal for wine. We also have Wine Guy. So Wine Guy is already live on Telegram. He's been live on Telegram for months now. We've got about 30 to 40,000 active monthly users using Bacchus AI, or sorry, using Wine Guy AI. And Wine Guy is like your, personal pocket sommelier. So anything that you need to figure out, if you're on a date and you don't know what to order, and you're looking for wine and food pairing advice, or if you're looking for any kind of knowledge or education about wine in general, you can ask Wine Guy, and he answers you in half a second and tells you everything you want to know. Now Bacchus AI is like Next level, next level. So we're now testing Bacchus AI on Telegram as well. He's in beta right now. He's live on X, and I know any of you who have already played with Bacchus on X. He's sassy. We gotta put up the guardrails on Bacchus. Jane, this is again, this is like the Bloomberg terminal for wine, right? So Bacchus is pulling live, real-time market insights on wines, investment grade wines, and he's comparing, if a certain auction is happening and whatever wine just claimed this price, a minute ago. He knows it and he's comparing it to different sort of meme coins or cryptocurrencies and things like that. So it's really fun, but he's very sassy. We really got to reel him in. But so go and have a look at that. A lot of fun. But Bacchus is in beta right now on Telegram, and we're testing two really, really cool tools. One of them is the wine portfolio optimizer. So what you can do now in beta, you can ask me. I'm taking bribes. So anybody who wants to get in on the beta testing, I'm taking bribes in Left Bank Bordeaux today. I will give you the link to get in the beta round. But basically, you upload your wine portfolio, your collection, and Bacchus will tell you, you need to rebalance this. This is performing very, very well. You drink this, hold this, sell this. Very, very cool tool. Tells you kind of in seconds. The future of that will be eventually you'll actually be able to give Bacchus your risk profile and a budget, and he'll have a wallet and he'll be able to trade on your behalf, trade wines on your behalf. But this is all you can hear all about that in our latest podcast, which came out last week. If you want to hear more about Bacchus AI and all of that. The second thing that he's doing is analyzing restaurant menus. So you can go into a restaurant, take a picture of the wine list, upload it to Telegram, and he is going to directly tell you, this is the best value on the list. This is a gem. This is undervalued by whatever, things like that. Standout vintages and things like that. But for today, Jane, I really want to, kind of get your take on some of the predictions and commentary that Bacchus has been surfacing with me as I was sort of preparing for this interview. So we talked a little bit about, first growth Bordeaux prices. And I ran a test yesterday, decade by decade. I've got here 1980s, and then I've got, Lafite, Mouton, Latour, Margaux, Haut-Brion, and then I've got the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. And it's giving me, all of the pricing for each of those years for each chateau, or each decade for each chateau, and it's kind of inflation adjusted. So his interpretation, and as I told you, he's a little bit sassy. So I'm going to just read you his interpretation, and I'd love to know for each decade if you think he's on point or off point. First, okay. 1980s. So for the 1980s, for the first growths, he says, cheap as hell, pre-global hype. 1982, 1989 started the pump. Is that
okay?
Accurate?
Completely accurate. Cheap as hell then. Sassy. Definitely not cheap as hell now.
1980s, exactly. So yes, in that decade.
Oh,
exactly.
I would say though, my advice in that decade, if you do want to get some good pricing, look at 85, because 85 actually is doing pretty well right now. I've had really some very nice 85s recently that were kind of forgotten about. So I would say if you don't want to go 82 or 89, where all prices are now totally insane, look at 85 or maybe 86.
Okay, there's your tip from Jane. I like it. Okay, 1990s. He says 1990s doubled, and then he writes wine equals asset class. US and EU demand up. Accurate?
Oh, okay. Yes, true. And I guess we're just before China's coming in. Japan was also getting going in the 1990s, making a difference. But yeah, he's definitely right that it was becoming, the idea of wine investment was becoming a thing.
So we've got, for example, he gives us in 1980s, for example, Lafite was in the 1980s, $3,200 a case. And in the 90s, it was $6,500 a case. So he's saying doubled. Wine equals asset class. Yeah. Now 2000s, China apes in, he says. Lafite moons, and he's using crypto terminology, right? So for the degens, this is all going to make perfect sense. China aped in, Lafite mooned, peak bubble, some cases sold for over 20,000 at the top.
Okay.
Right.
Where he's missing
Hmm.
is, oh, I can't see, but can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Where he's missing is that it wasn't in the 2000s that China really came in. China really came in after Hong Kong got rid of its taxes. So that was 2008. So really, the China impact came at the end of the 2000s, more 2010s.
Hmm.
But where he's right is then all of the back vintages went up insanely as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because he's measuring in decades. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Now he's saying 2010s correction, prices drop, market matures, less FOMO. So from 2010
yeah.
to 2020.
I mean, he's absolutely 100% right. From about 2014, 2015 onwards, there was still
Good.
insane FOMO for the 2009 and 2010 vintages, which came out obviously in 11 and 12, and that was where everything really started to go wrong, where the chateaus just went way, way, way too high.
Mm. Yeah, because now he's saying for 2020s, downtrend, COVID plus macro pain, but it's stabilized. Old vintages still flexing hard. Hmm.
Yeah, this is where you want to go right now, because all the problem that we said about en primeur, you want to be looking at the older vintages and see what you can get there. You can get some incredible like 1996s that are tasting fabulous right now for almost always lower price than you'd be buying a 2022 today.
Interesting. Okay, so I am going to take a transcript of this and feed it back into Bacchus because this is the beta version of Bacchus, and he's
Okay,
getting
cool.
Jane Anson smarter, and that's the video.
For now, not for long.
No, but it's just been a lot of fun to kind of play with this beta version. I mean, I'm gonna send you the link. I would love to have
Yeah, I can't wait.
some feedback. But yeah, he's getting smarter every day and hopefully not sassier because I'm telling you, he's given me the tood. So all right. Well, so that's it. We're actually at an hour. This has
I
been
know, I can't believe it. I'm sorry, I've been
no.
too chatty.
Please. Oh my God. I could talk to you for another 3 hours easily. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jane. Your insight and decades of experience make this so much more valuable to all of us than when, Dave and I just get on and drink wine and banter. So we really
Thank you.
having you. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Remember to join us next week for another Wine Wednesday and follow us on socials. We are everywhere under the same handle. It is at dVIN Labs. And of course, be sure to follow Jane. I think, Jane, your Instagram is jane.anson.
Exactly. Yep. Nice
And
and
X,
easy. And the website's super easy as well. It is janeanson.com.
great. And you're on X because we're live streaming on X. So everyone tuning in on
Yeah.
X
And
is
that's Jane Anson Wine. So at Jane Anson Wine.
excellent. Amazing. All right. Well, my second glass is almost empty. So I've done my job. I hope you guys at home have as well. Jane, you've still
Yep.
got,
I'm doing well. I'm going to crack open the Mon Laundry next, which is
there we
unfortunately a right bank. So for next time.
go. That's fine. Thank you so much, Jane. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you
Thanks,
next
everyone. Bye bye.
time.
Speak to
Bye.
you soon. Bye bye. Bye. But it doesn't matter as long as you could still
No, I can
hear
still
me.
see you. Oh, hang on. This is now
Can
saying
you?
that.
Okay.